Spider-Man's web shooters weren't just a cool gadget. They were Stan Lee's solution to a problem that had plagued superhero comics since Superman first appeared. And that one design choice created a debate that's lasted 60 years. In 1962, Stan Lee needed to create a teenage superhero who felt different from every other character in comics. But he had a problem. If Spider-Man got all his powers from the radioactive spider bite, super strength, wall crawling, spider sense, and organic webbing, he'd just be another invincible hero. Peter Parker would be powerful by accident. There'd be no ingenuity, no resourcefulness, no brain, just another kid who got lucky and became unstoppable. That's not relatable, that's not interesting, and Stan Lee knew it. So he made one decision that changed everything. The spider bite gave Peter his powers, but the web shooters? Peter built those himself. This is the story of why that mattered, how it defined Spider-Man's entire philosophy, and why fans still can't agree if it was genius or a mistake. When Steve Ditko and Stan Lee created Spider-Man in 1962, they were designing him in the shadow of Superman. Superman could do everything: fly, shoot heat vision, tank bullets, lift buildings. He was powerful because of his alien biology. He didn't have to think, he didn't have to build, he just was super. Stan Lee wanted the opposite. He wanted a hero who had to work for it. Peter Parker wasn't supposed to be naturally gifted at everything. He was supposed to be smart in a specific way. He was a science prodigy, a chemistry and physics genius who struggled socially but excelled academically. That intelligence needed to matter. It needed to be part of his heroism, not just background detail. So when Steve Ditko designed Spider-Man's abilities, he drew a clear line. The spider bite gave Peter 3 powers: super strength, the ability to cling to walls, and a precognitive spider sense that warned him of danger. Those were the biological gifts. Everything else, the costume, the web formula, the mechanical web shooters, Peter built in his bedroom. A 15-year-old kid using high school chemistry equipment created a tensile web fluid strong enough to stop a moving car, designed wrist-mounted shooters precise enough to swing between buildings, and engineered it all on a teenager's allowance. That wasn't a small detail. That was the entire point. Spider-Man was only half super. The other half was human ingenuity. And that design philosophy created something no other superhero had: vulnerability through limitation. Because here's what the web shooters meant in practice. Spider-Man could run out of ammunition. In Amazing Spider-Man issue 12, barely a year into the character's existence, Peter's fighting the Hulk and his web shooters run empty mid-swing. He crashes into a building. In issue 19, he's battling the Sandman, and his web fluid cartridges are depleted. He has to retreat and rebuild his supply before finishing the fight. This happened constantly. Sometimes it was dramatic tension, sometimes it was played for humor. Peter swinging through the city, cartoon-style sound effect, thwip, nothing. But it was always a reminder that Peter Parker was breakable. Other heroes didn't have this problem. Batman's utility belt never ran out of batarangs mid-fight. Superman's heat vision didn't suddenly stop working because he forgot to recharge. But Spider-Man? He was only as effective as his preparation. If he didn't build enough cartridges, if he didn't maintain his web shooters, if he got distracted by school or Aunt May's health, or his part-time job at the Daily Bugle, he was just a strong kid who could stick to walls. Useful, but not unstoppable. That limitation forced creativity. Peter couldn't rely on raw power. He had to outthink his enemies. When he fought Electro, he couldn't just punch him. He used his web fluid as an insulator. Against Sandman, he mixed his web formula with water to create a trapping solution. When Mysterio used illusions, Peter relied on his spider sense because his web shooters couldn't hit what wasn't real. Every major Spider-Man villain required Peter to adapt his web fluid, modify his shooters, or abandon them entirely and use his environment. The web shooters weren't just a weapon. They were a symbol of Peter's mind being his greatest asset. But that symbolism created a rift in fandom that still hasn't healed. In 2002, Sam Raimi directed the first Spider-Man movie. Tobey Maguire played Peter Parker. The film was a cultural phenomenon. $821 million worldwide, the first superhero movie to break $100 million in an opening weekend. A moment that proved superhero films could be box office giants. But Raimi made one controversial change. He gave Peter organic web shooters. The spider bite didn't just give him strength and wall crawling. It gave him spinnerets in his wrists. He could produce webbing biologically, like an actual spider. Comic purists lost their minds, because organic web shooters undid everything Stan Lee and Steve Ditko intended. If Peter's webbing was biological, he wasn't building anything. He wasn't a genius inventor. He was just a kid who got bitten and became powerful by accident, exactly what Stan Lee wanted to avoid. The entire philosophy collapsed. Peter Parker was no longer half super and half human. He was fully super. His brain didn't matter anymore. But Raimi's defenders had a counter-argument, and it's still convincing today. They argued that a 15-year-old kid inventing a tensile polymer stronger than steel in his bedroom using 1960s high school chemistry equipment strained believability. Even in a world with radioactive spiders and mechanical arms, Peter's web fluid was absurd. It was comic book logic that didn't translate to film. Organic webbing made more sense. If the spider bite could rewrite his DNA to give him wall crawling and super strength, why couldn't it also give him web production? Spiders make webs. That's what they do. Peter Parker got spider powers. Therefore, he should make webs. Simple. The debate exploded. Forums, comment sections, comic shops. Everyone had an opinion. Some fans argued that removing Peter's web shooter invention removed his defining trait. Others argued that organic webs made the character more cohesive and eliminated the plot holes, like how a broke teenager affords the chemical compounds for web fluid, or how he manufactures hundreds of cartridges weekly without anyone noticing. And that debate never ended. The Amazing Spider-Man films in 2012 brought back mechanical web shooters. The MCU's Spider-Man initially had Tony Stark build his suit and web shooters, which created another controversy. Was Peter still a genius if a billionaire handed him the tech? Spider-Man. Homecoming spent half its runtime proving Peter could build his own gear before Tony upgraded it. Every adaptation has to navigate the same question. What makes Spider-Man super? His biology or his brain? That question exists because Stan Lee and Steve Ditko made the web shooters mechanical. If they'd given Peter organic webbing from the start, there'd be no debate. Spider-Man would just be another hero with a full suite of powers. But they didn't. They created limitation. They forced Peter to build, to maintain, to prepare. They made his intelligence part of his heroism. And 60 years later, we're still arguing about whether that was the right choice. Here's what the web shooters actually represent. They're the physical manifestation of Spider-Man's core philosophy, that power without responsibility is meaningless, but power combined with intellect and preparation can change the world. Peter Parker isn't special because a spider bit him. Dozens of people could have been bitten by that spider. Peter's special because he looked at his new abilities and asked, "What else can I do?" He built web shooters. He designed a costume. He created a formula that scientists at Oscorp couldn't replicate. He took biological gifts and enhanced them with human ingenuity. That's the thesis of Spider-Man. And it only works if the web shooters are something Peter made, not something he was given. The legacy of that design choice goes beyond Spider-Man. It established a template that superhero comics still use today. Iron Man's genius matters because his technology is self-made. Batman's effectiveness comes from his preparation and gadgets. Black Panther's vibranium technology enhances his abilities but doesn't replace his intellect. Modern superhero design understands that limitation creates better characters than unlimited power. And that understanding started with Stan Lee saying, "The spider gives him 3 powers. Everything else, Peter builds himself." Spider-Man's web shooters weren't just a cool gadget. They were proof that the best superheroes aren't defined by what they're born with. They're defined by what they build. From the mechanical web shooters that defined Spider-Man's genius, we've seen how one design choice shaped 60 years of stories when sparked decades of debate. But Spider-Man's costume had another element that caused even bigger controversy, and it wasn't added by Stan Lee or Steve Ditko. The black suit arrived in 1984, and it didn't just change Spider-Man's appearance, it changed his personality, created Marvel's most profitable villain, and revealed a corporate strategy that turned reader rage into profit. Watch that next to see how Marvel monetized controversy and built a $5 billion symbiote empire on fan backlash.